Hey folks, this is Rhykker with a Diablo 3 Season 28 Patch 2.6.5 Wizard Build Guide. This guide is for the Typhon's Veil Hydra Wizard, which is the Season 28 starter set, and got a considerable buff this season, with the 6-piece bonus now dealing double damage. While this isn't the most powerful wizard build, we'll have that video coming up tomorrow, it'll be super easy to put this build together because you get the set, the 6-piece set, by doing your first few steps of the season journey to get your Haedrig's gift. This build is also really good for farming, and again, because of the buff, it's now stronger than ever. This guide doesn't rely on any season-specific mechanics, so it'll still be applicable on non-season and in future seasons. So in this video, we're going to go over the gear, the skills, and the playstyle that you need to rock this build. The gameplay footage you're seeing in the background was recorded by Maxroll's Wudijo, and you can reference the written guide here, put together by Diablo 3 Mastermind Chewy on maxroll.gg. So let's start with an overview of the gear. This build, of course, revolves around the Typhon set, which is all about Hydra. The 2-piece bonus doubles the duration of Hydras and increases the number of heads on your multi-headed Hydras by 2. The 4-piece bonus reduces the amount of damage you take by 8% for each Hydra head that is currently active. But every time you take damage, a Hydra head dies. So keeping your full Hydras up will be a key part of this build. The 6-piece bonus makes Hydras deal 4,000% increased damage for each Hydra head that is alive. Now this was 2,000, it's being buffed to 4,000 in Season 28. At most, you can have 10 active Hydra heads, so this will be 40,000% increased damage. Now there's some other key items for this build as well. The Serpent Sparker Wand. This lets you have an extra Hydra active, and it gives you a 300% damage buff. Then we also want the Winter Flurry Source. Specifically because of the second part of its power, your Hydras deal 150% increased damage to enemies in a blizzard. So this build is going to be about popping down Hydras, but also casting Blizzard on enemies that you want to be targeting. Another key item we'll work in is a second wand, the Fragment of Destiny. This makes your signature spells attack 50% faster and deal triple damage. Now we don't care about that damage buff, but we do care about the 50% faster attack speed. Why? Because every time we land a hit with a signature spell, we gain a spectral buff. You can stack 10 of these, and for each buff stack, your Hydras deal 30% increased damage. So you want to rapidly spam your signature spells to get your 10 stacks up so that your Hydras can benefit from 300% increased damage. Now between these two, you're going to have to cube one. Whichever one rolls better, keep that one, put the other in the cube. Another key item, the Magistrate Wizard Hat. Your Hydras now periodically cast Frost Nova and deal 300% increased damage. It's really that damage multiplier that we're chasing here. The Frost Nova actually does help though, it crowd controls the enemies, and we're gonna then be able to benefit from our Bane of the Trapped. But we'll get to legendary gems later. Another very important item is the Tasker and Theo gloves. These increase the attack speed of your pets, i.e. Hydra, by 50%. Now in order to fit in extra items here, we'll need to take the Ring of Royal Grandeur. This reduces the number of items needed for set bonuses by 1. So we're gonna equip 5 pieces of the Typhon set, and then we'll wear a Ring of Royal Grandeur in our cube so that we still benefit from the 6-piece bonus. The Ring of Royal Grandeur you're going to get by doing Act 1 bounties. You'll get it from Act 1 bounty bags. You cannot get it from Kadala. You cannot get it as a random world drop. So it's thanks to the Ring of Royal Grandeur that we can equip either the Magistrate Helm or Tasker and Theo gloves. The other will have to go in the cube. Ideally, if you don't have a perfectly rolled Tasker and Theo with 50% attack speed, then it's best to cube Tasker and Theo and wear the Magistrate. Attack speed breakpoints are important for this build, and it can be difficult to reach those breakpoints without a 50% roll on your Tasker and Theo. When you put an item in the cube, it gets its max roll. Another item that we'll want is Squirt's Necklace. While not taking damage, damage dealt is increased by up to 100%, and damage taken is increased by up to 50%. Now, damage dealt here is defined by you losing life. If you have an Absorb shield, and that's taking damage, then your Squirt's buff is maintained, and wizards are the best class for maintaining shields. Another essential item is the Halo of Carini. This is mandatory for our defense. We're so squishy without it. You take up to 80% less damage for 5 seconds after your storm armor electrocutes an enemy more than 15 yards away. Now, something that people can easily forget. You're fighting a Rift Guardian. It's just you and him left. You're standing close to the Rift Guardian. Then, boom, you get one shot and you're wondering, what just happened there? Your Halo of Carini buff probably fell off. Every couple seconds, or every 5 seconds, 4 seconds, you want to move away from the Rift Guardian. Put at least 16 yards of distance, rather, between you and the Rift Guardian so that your Halo of Carini can zap him again and maintain your damage reduction. Now, we got a couple extra gear slots to fill in here. And the Guardian set is a very powerful early season set. You equip the belt, you equip the bracers, and thanks to the Ring of Royal Grandeur, you're benefiting from the 3-piece bonus. What does Guardians do? It got buffed within the last couple of seasons to be very strong. Your melee damage reduction is increased by 1% per 1,000 base vitality from equipped items. Your missile damage reduction is increased by 1% per base strength, dexterity, or intelligence from equipped items, depending on your class. In this case, it would be intelligence. Then the 3-piece bonus, you gain an additional 100% of your base strength, dexterity, intelligence, and vitality attributes from equipped items. Doubling the intelligence on all your gear is a sizable damage buff, especially early season. This will not double intelligence from Paragon. It will not double intelligence from augments. Early season, this set is so powerful because it does the work of hundreds, thousands of Paragon. Similarly, your vitality stats getting doubled, tons of toughness there. At the end of a season, you won't see top players running Guardians, but for the vast majority of us, Guardians remains a very solid option for the majority of a season, if not the entire season. Your alternative to the Guardian set here would be to get Ashnagar's Blood Bracers. These increase the potency of your shields by 100%. That'll help us maintain our squirts buff, help us stay alive, and you'll get the Shame of Delzier belt. This makes your signature spells attack 50% faster and restore arcane power. That'll allow you to build up your stacks faster, and your various synergies that we'll get to for spamming your signature spell. But again, I can't recommend enough Guardians. It is a crafted set as well. Once you get that recipe to drop, you can craft this set instantly. Then lastly, we'll take a Convention of Elements. This is the damage maximizing option. You gain a 200% damage buff to a single element, and it rotates through all the elements. So for 4 seconds, it's fire. 4 seconds, cold. 4 seconds, arcane, etc., etc. If you're running a Convention of Elements, ideally you want to make sure that when you are in your damage window, in this case your cold damage rotation, you are laying down your Hydras, you are maximizing your damage output. Now, if you want more toughness instead, you can opt instead for a Unity Ring. This is only for solo play, however. You put one on yourself, one on your follower, and this has the effect of doubling your toughness, because you're only taking half damage from hits. Of course, you gotta combine this with the follower item that makes them invulnerable. Otherwise, you're just taking half the damage they're taking as well. Now, another option for either speedrunning or if you really don't want to deal with the rotation is a Stone of Jordan. A Stone of Jordan inherently rolls with elemental damage on it, so it squeezes out a bit more damage, and if you're doing speed content, you don't have time to wait for your cold rotation. It overall just gives you more consistent damage output. Now, we'll go over exactly what we want on every piece of gear, but first we'll take a look at the skills. First, we'll take Hydra, Frost Hydra. Now, normally the best rune for Hydra is Mammoth Hydra, but Mammoth Hydra gives you only one Hydra head. That works against our set bonus for Typhons. So we rule out Mammoth, and what we're left with at the intersection of dealing enough damage and dealing enough damage in an area, because in general area damage is king, we got the Frost Hydra. 255 damage in a short-range cone in front of the Hydra. It's something like a shotgun spread. Now, this means that if you really want to optimize your play, you can be strategic about how you place your Hydras, knowing its attack pattern. If you just plop down a Hydra in the middle of enemies, it's only going to be hitting one sector of those enemies at a time. But if there's a big circle of enemies and you put it to the side, then it could be shooting towards all of those enemies. Next, we're going to want to take Spectral Blade Barrier Blades. We need a signature spell for our Fragment of Destiny, and with Barrier Blades, every cast gives you a protective shield for 3 seconds that absorbs 4% of your life in damage. So you can blast up a stack of shield very quickly thanks to the 50% speed buff on Fragment of Destiny, and if you're opting for Shame of Delzir, that other 50% attack speed buff. So now we have 2 reasons to be spamming our Spectral Blades: keep up your barrier, and keep up your Fragment of Destiny damage buff stacks. And remember, you're also keeping a full 10 heads of Hydra up at any given time. If a head goes down, pop down another Hydra. And again, try to position it such that it's hitting the maximum number of enemies at a time. Next, we're taking Blizzard for that Winter Flurry synergy. The damage of Blizzard is irrelevant. We're going to take the Apocalypse rune because that increases the radius. A bigger blizzard hits more enemies, therefore more enemies are benefiting from the damage buff. Well, you're benefiting from the damage buff against them. They're benefiting from less suffering before they die. Next, we're taking Storm Armor for our Halo of Carini. For the rune, you got a couple options. If you are pushing the highest Greater Rifts, if you're facing content that is really going to kill you, Shocking Aspect guarantees more uptime on the Halo of Carini buff. You're going to be critting about half the time or more. So you have a pretty strong deterministic way of keeping that buff up. Otherwise, you're at the mercy of whenever your Storm Armor decides to lay down a lightning bolt. The electrocutions caused by Shocking Aspect count for the Halo of Carini. If you're zipping fast through Nephilim Rifts, you can get the Scramble rune. This increases your movement speed by 25% for 3 seconds. Otherwise, if you're doing maybe speed Greater Rifts and you're needing to cast your Hydras and your very resource-heavy Blizzard to maximize your damage stacks, you might run into resource issues. So Power of the Storm reduces the arcane power cost of all skills by 3 while Storm Armor is active. Next, you'll want to take Teleport Wormhole. Teleport, excellent utility skill. Wormhole lets us cast it a second time for free within 3 seconds. Then lastly, we have an open slot. We're going to take Black Hole Absolute Zero. Black Hole is going to group enemies tightly together, making it easy for your Hydra to target them, but also each enemy hit increases the damage of your cold spells, Frost Hydra, by 3% for 10 seconds. When you land that on a nice big group, this is a considerable damage buff. Now this works something else into our rotation here for the gameplay. You pop down your Absolute Zero, get that damage buff that'll then apply to your Hydra. Now your Hydra damage snapshots, in other words, whatever buffs you have at the time of casting your Hydra, that summoned Hydra will continue to benefit from, even if you yourself have that buff drop off. So again, ideally, you want to be spamming your Spectral Blades to get your Fragment of Destiny buff all the way up. You lay down your Black Hole to get that damage buff up. Then you lay down your maximized Hydra. And then, of course, drop a Blizzard on your enemies. Now, there will be one more thing to work into the rotation as we get into our passives here. So first passive we'll want is Galvanizing Ward. As long as you've not taken damage for 5 seconds, you gain a 60% life shield. Big help for keeping up the squirts. Next, you'll want Audacity. You deal 30% additional damage to enemies within 15 yards. That's 15 yards of you, not of your Hydras. Now, thankfully, this build is very tanky, so you can get into the thick of things, into the face of enemies. Next, you'll want Elemental Exposure. Damaging enemies with Arcane, Cold, Fire, or Lightning will cause them to take 5% more damage from your attacks for 5 seconds. Each different damage type applies a stack, stacking up to 4 times. So you can have a total of 20% additional damage here by cycling through your damage types. So we got Cold covered with Hydra, we got Arcane covered with Spectral Blade, we got Fire covered with Blizzard, and then we're dealing lightning damage via Storm Armor. If you're relying just on Storm Armor, you might have a hard time keeping up your full 4 elemental exposure stacks. This is why on our weapon, we'll want to roll lightning damage. This is one of the few instances in the entire game where the damage type of your weapon actually matters. Whatever elemental damage type your weapon is dealing, that will count towards a stack of elemental exposure. So lightning on the weapon, fire from Blizzard, arcane from Spectral Blade, cold from Hydra, and you are covered. Then lastly, we'll want to take Arcane Dynamo. When you cast a signature spell, you gain a flash of insight, and after 5 flashes of insight, your next non-signature spell deals 60% additional damage. So, another reason why you want to spam Spectral Blade before laying down your Hydra. Thankfully, this is part of the same rotation. You're spamming Spectral Blade to get your Fragment of Destiny stacks, to get your Arcane Dynamo stacks. However, you want to make sure you cast Black Hole first, because otherwise Black Hole is going to gobble up your Arcane Dynamo stacks. So Black Hole, spam Spectral Blade, lay down your Hydra. Because again, Hydra's going to snapshot the damage of Arcane Dynamo. Now if you're speed farming, you don't have time to stop and care about positioning so much. You don't have to be 15 yards next to an enemy. You don't want to have to be fussing over stacks so much. You want things to be dying so fast you don't have to juggle all these different buff stacks. So in that case, we're going to be swapping from Audacity to Power Hungry. Now you're dealing 30% additional damage to enemies that are farther than 30 yards away from you. Why? You just want to be running through the map, laying down your Hydras and killing things without having to move close to them to maximize your damage. Because of that, you can't have Spectral Blades. You're not in melee anymore. So instead you take Electrocute, Chain Lightning. With Chain Lightning, you're hitting 10 enemies. That's instantly 10 stacks of Fragment of Destiny. That does mean you're losing arcane damage, so you'd want to have arcane damage on your weapon, but you can also just not have arcane damage. If you're speedrunning, that extra 5% damage going from 15% to 20% damage buff, probably not even going to make a difference. But technically, to maximize your damage, you'll want a separate weapon with arcane. Now, losing Spectral Blade's barrier means we're losing shield, so we're going to get Dominance, and you're going to swap out Arcane Dynamo to get it. We're not stopping to cast a signature spell 5 times, we're casting it once to get all those stacks. We don't got time for stacks. So you're losing that extra damage from Arcane Dynamo, but instead you're getting with Dominance, killing an enemy grants a shield that absorbs 2% of your life in damage for 3 seconds, stacking up to 10 times. This helps us maintain our Squirts buff, which gives us double damage, which is far more than what we'd be getting from Arcane Dynamo anyway. Now, if you're doing even easier content, speed rifts, or otherwise you're doing so much damage that you can afford to lose the Fragment of Destiny, then an Ether Walker becomes a very inviting option in your cube. Teleport no longer has a cooldown, but costs 25 arcane power. Now at this point, you no longer have a reason to even have a signature spell at all, so you're going to swap that out for Familiar Arcanaut to gain 4.5 arcane power per second. Because now we're going to be very resource thirsty. And at this point, we're losing enough different sources of damage that it's worth dropping elemental exposure. And if you want more damage, you can get Glass Cannon. This increases all your damage done by 15%, but decreases armor and resistances by 10%. Again, for speed content, we shouldn't have trouble surviving. But another option there would be Illusionist. And this is so that after we use Teleport, we have a 30% move speed buff for 3 seconds. This will help you move a bit faster when you can't maintain 100% teleport. As for exactly what we want on every piece of gear. On your shoulders, Intelligence, Hydra damage, Area damage, and Vitality. For your helm, Intelligence, Vitality, Crit chance, and for the socket you can go with an Amethyst for 23% more life. That's recommended for the pushing setup. For speedruns, if you want to have quicker access to teleport, you can go with a diamond for cooldown reduction. And if you're running with an Ether Walker, you can go with a topaz for resource cost reduction. For your amulet, crit chance, crit damage, cold damage. For your gloves, intelligence, crit damage, crit chance, and attack speed. Now let's talk a bit about attack speed breakpoints. Now the logical thing to assume is that as you increase your attack speed, you increase your damage no matter what. Well, as it turns out, this actually is not the case. There are breakpoints. In other words, once you have a certain amount of attack speed, you need to increase your attack speed to another amount before you're actually dealing more damage. If you're somewhere between 2 breakpoints, you're doing the same amount of damage as the lower breakpoint. You gotta increase your attack speed, On your character sheet, you can see you have 1.86 attacks per second, for instance. You got to reach that next breakpoint before you are actually doing more damage. And the game doesn't tell you what these breakpoints are, but thankfully, maxroll.gg does. So the ideal attack speed breakpoint you want to be reaching is 1.86 attacks per second. You would get this from a perfect 50% Nazgren Theo, plus the 10% that you can get from Paragon Points, plus 7% more attack speed on your weapon, and then 2 more 7% attack speed rolls. So one of those can be on your gloves. If you don't have 777, then you need a 4th item with attack speed to reach that 1.86 breakpoint. If you want to go into the real crunchy math of it all, you can check out the excellent max roll guide by Chewy. But to simplify things here, your ideal case, max out attack speed in Paragon, 7% on weapon, 7% on 2 other pieces of gear. If you don't have those fully maxed out, you need a 4th item. Otherwise, just give up and go down to having only 1 item with attack speed. You just don't want to be in that zone where you're wasting an attribute, an affix, on attack speed that's not actually benefiting you. So again, either 3 perfect or 4 imperfect items with attack speed, or just 1. Alright, moving on to the chest. Intelligence, Vitality, Hydra damage, and then in your chest and pants, if you want more toughness, you're going to go for armor, which is going to come via either rubies or emeralds. If you want more damage, you go with topazes for intelligence. Your bracers, cold damage, intelligence, vitality, crit chance. Your belt, intelligence, vitality, life percent, and armor. Pants, intelligence, vitality, armor. Boots, intelligence, vitality, armor, all resist. Your rings, in the perfect setup, they're both going to have crit chance and crit damage, then one will have attack speed, and the other will have raw damage. The raw damage is only optimal if the item is ancient. Otherwise, you're better off with intelligence than raw damage. Your weapon, percent damage, intelligence, attack speed, and remember, you're going for that lightning damage roll, or if you're on the speedrunning variant, you could go with arcane, but you can probably afford to drop it. Just have that one weapon, keep it on lightning, make your life easy. In your offhand, raw damage, cold damage, intelligence, crit chance, and Hydra damage. For your legendary gems, the mandatory, most important one is the Enforcer gem. Increases the damage of your pets. This is the single biggest damage multiplier you'll get from a legendary gem. Next, we'll take a Bane of the Trapped. Thanks to our Magistrate, Frost Novas are shooting out, enemies are crowd controlled. Bane of the Trapped deals more damage to crowd controlled enemies. Then lastly, for pushing greater rifts, a Bane of the Stricken. The more you attack an enemy, the more you gain a stacking damage buff against him, and 25% increased damage against Rift Guardians. This is just for pushing. If it's taking you close to 15 minutes to finish a rift, otherwise, if you're doing speed content, do not take a Bane of the Stricken. Instead, you can take a Zaeith Stone of Vengeance. Because again, if you're doing speed content, you're not staying close to enemies. Zaeith Stone of Vengeance makes you deal more damage the further away from an enemy you are. For the follower, we're going to want the Scoundrel to maximize our damage. For the skills that we're going to pick, for his first tier of skill, pick nothing. They both apply crowd controls, which messes with our own crowd controls. That said, if you've selected one, there's no way to unselect at that point. We do want him to take Anatomy. This increases your crit chance. We want to take Piercing Shot for the 10% increased damage. And we want to take Knight's Veil for the massive crit buff. Again, we're going to give him a Skeleton Key so that he cannot die. If you're wearing a Unity, you slap a Unity on him. Otherwise, we want to stack him with some Emanate items. Flavor of Time, very important. Pylon effects last twice as long, emanates to you. Nemesis Bracers, Shrines will spawn an enemy champion, emanates to you. Oculus Ring, chance for a golden pool to appear on the ground. You stand in that, you're going to deal up to 85% increased damage. You give him some Ice Climbers so that he's immune to freeze and immobilize effects. And the rest of the items don't matter a whole lot. If you're hardcore, you want to give him Homing Pad so that you can teleport away. It emanates to you. As you're teleporting, you won't be interrupted. But more importantly, you just want to stack as much dexterity on him as possible in order to maximize the effect of his skills, since they all scale based on dexterity. For your Paragon Points, you want to max out your move speed. Then you want to pump into vitality until you feel comfortable. Generally, once your total life is around 900,000, that should be enough, but it's to your preference. Then dump everything into intelligence. For offense, start with attack speed. You want to hit that attack speed breakpoint. Then crit damage and crit chance, maintaining a global 10-to-1 ratio between the two. Then cooldown reduction. For defense, armor, life percent, all resist, life regeneration. For utility, area damage, resource cost reduction, life per hit, and pickup radius. And that's going to wrap up this guide. As a reminder, we'll have a video guide out on the best wizard build, the Talrasha wizard. You can use this one to farm towards that. That video will go up tomorrow, and we'll have more Season 28 guides coming as well, including the tier list video. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch, Patreon, and YouTube supporters for making these videos possible. If you like what you see on this channel and want to support the creation of more content, you can consider pledging on YouTube or Patreon and unlocking behind-the-scenes content, monthly virtual hangouts, and more. If you enjoyed this video, please share it. Check out these other videos and subscribe to join Rhykker's Raiders for more Diablo content.